The first Jerry walks in. He is wearing the kind of clothes Jerry wears, the slightly too casual outfit of a man who stopped thinking very hard about what he put on in the morning some years ago and has not yet found a reason to start again. He looks around the lobby with the expression Jerry tends to wear in unfamiliar situations, which is somewhere between polite confusion and the specific hopefulness of someone who wants very badly to be told that everything is going to be fine. Then another Jerry walks in behind him, then another and another. The lobby fills slowly, the way a waiting room fills, one person at a time, each arrival slightly overlapping with the one before it, until the space that seemed almost adequate for one or two people is revealed to be designed for something considerably larger in scope. Chairs arranged in rows, a front desk, magazines on a low table. The specific institutional quality of a space that was built not for any single visit, but for continuous, ongoing, high-volume use. Some of the Jerrys are talking to each other, some are not. Some are reading the magazines with the focused attention of people who are not actually reading, but who have discovered that holding a magazine is an effective way to avoid making eye contact with the identical faces surrounding them. Some are filling out paperwork at the front desk with the careful, slightly anxious penmanship of people who take forms seriously. One is standing near the window, looking at something outside with an expression that could be contemplation or could be the specific blankness of a mind that has temporarily stopped generating content and is simply waiting for something to prompt it back into operation. Nobody seems particularly surprised, not by the identical faces, not by the sheer number of them, not by the specific, quietly surreal quality of a room in which every person present is, in some foundational sense, the same person. This is Jerryboree. And in Season 2, Episode 2, Morty Night Run, it is presented with exactly the level of ceremony that its operators apparently consider appropriate for a daycare that caters to an infinite supply of the same man. Which is to say, very little ceremony at all. Rick and Morty has, across its run, depicted a lot of things that should be extraordinary and presented them as ordinary. Entire civilizations existing inside car batteries, alien theme parks, interdimensional cable television, death crystals that show you every possible version of your own dying. The show has a specific talent for taking premises that would be the entire premise of a different, more earnest science fiction story and treating them as background, as the ambient texture of a universe that has been strange for long enough that strange has stopped being a category worth marking. Jerryboree fits this pattern. But Jerryboree is also doing something the other examples are not quite doing. Because Jerryboree is not just strange, Jerryboree is specific. It is a facility designed for one person. Not one type of person, not one category of being, one specific individual, reproduced across infinite dimensions, who exists in enough quantity and with enough consistency that someone looked at the logistical challenge of multiversal Rick and Morty adventures and decided that what the situation required was a dedicated storage solution for the Jerrys that those adventures generated as a byproduct. The math of this is worth sitting with for a moment. In order for Jerryboree to exist as a functioning business, several things had to be true simultaneously. Jerry had to exist in enough dimensions to constitute a reliable customer base. The Ricks and Mortys in those dimensions had to be going on enough adventures to generate a regular need for somewhere to leave Jerry while they were gone. And enough of those Ricks and Mortys had to have independently concluded that bringing Jerry along was worse than the logistics of not bringing him, which required a solution, which Jerryboree provided. Jerryboree is the multiverse's institutional acknowledgement that Jerry is simultaneously everywhere and consistently in the way. That is a remarkable thing to be, and it is worth understanding before getting into who Jerry actually is and what he actually represents, because Jerryboree tells you something that character analysis alone does not quite capture. It tells you that the universe keeps making him, over and over, in dimension after dimension, with enough regularity that a daycare built specifically for him is economically viable. Whatever Jerry is, the multiverse has decided it needs a lot of him. The drop-off at Jerryboree is one of the show's quietest and most precise character moments. It lasts only a few seconds. Rick pulls up, the logistics are handled, Jerry is deposited, Rick and Morty leave to do whatever they are going to do without him. The scene does not linger. The show does not ask you to feel very much about it. it moves on. But the image it leaves behind is a specific one. Jerry standing in the Jerryboree lobby, watching Rick and Morty's vehicle pull away, surrounded by other Jerrys who are all, in their various ways, also just standing there. The image works because of what it does not say. It does not say Jerry is pathetic. It does not say Rick is wrong. It does not ask you to take a side in the ongoing negotiation between these two people over what Jerry's presence in the family is worth and what it costs. It simply shows you the situation. A man being left somewhere. A facility built for exactly this purpose. A universe that has decided this is a thing that needs to exist. And then it moves on, leaving you with the question that Jerryboree plants and that the rest of the show spends years examining from different angles. Who is this person that the multiverse keeps creating? What does he want? What is he afraid of? Why does he keep ending up in the lobby? And why, across every dimension the show has ever depicted, does some version of Jerry always seem to end up in approximately the same place? The Jerrys at Jerryboree talk to each other. This is where the facility becomes genuinely interesting from a lore perspective, because the conversations these Jerrys have, however brief and however much the show plays them for comedy, are the first time the series shows you what happens when Jerry is removed from the specific social context that usually defines him. At home, Jerry exists in relationship to Rick, to Beth, to Morty, and Summer. His personality, his anxieties, his moments of confidence, and his much more frequent moments of doubt, all of it plays out in the presence of people who have specific, established opinions about him. Rick thinks he is useless. Beth's feelings are more complicated. Morty and Summer love him in the unexamined way children love parents before they are old enough to form opinions about them as people. At Jerryboree, those relationships are absent. Jerry is just Jerry, in a room full of Jerrys, with no Rick to feel small in front of, and no Beth to perform for, and no children whose respect he is quietly, constantly trying to earn. And what you get in those brief glimpses of Jerrys talking to Jerrys is something the home environment almost never produces. Jerry, slightly relaxed. Not fully, not in any dramatic personality transforming way, but in the specific, small way that people relax when the audience most responsible for their anxiety is not present. When they can say something without calculating in advance how Rick will process it, or whether Beth will find it impressive, or whether it will confirm the household's working assumption that Jerry is not quite equal to the situation. At Jerryboree, Jerry can just talk. And what he talks about, when he talks to other Jerrys, is revealing. He talks about his life, about his family, about the things he is proud of and the things he is worried about, and the ongoing, exhausting project of being a person who wants to matter and is not always sure he does. He talks about Beth in the specific way people talk about relationships that are important to them and that they are not entirely sure they are handling correctly. He talks about Morty and Summer with the warmth that parental love produces even when everything else is uncertain. He talks like someone who has a lot to say and does not often find an audience that wants to hear it. And in a room full of identical men who share his exact history and his exact anxieties and his exact relationship to the gap between who he is and who he wanted to be, Jerry finds, briefly, the audience that the rest of his life rarely provides. People who already know what he means, because they are him. The comedy of Jerryboree is real, and the show earns it. But the comedy sits on top of something that is not quite comedy, because Jerryboree is not just a funny premise. It is a window into a specific question the show has been building toward from its earliest episodes. What is Jerry for? Not in the dismissive sense that Rick would frame the question, as a rhetorical challenge designed to demonstrate that Jerry has no satisfying answer, but in the genuine sense. In the sense of, what function does this person serve in the structure of the show? What does the multiverse's insistence on producing him, dimension after dimension, tell you about what the multiverse considers necessary? The easy answer is that Jerry is the comedy character, the everyman foil, The person whose ordinary anxieties and ordinary failures create the contrast that makes Rick's extraordinary capability legible as extraordinary. Without Jerry failing at things a genius would find trivial, Rick's genius loses some of its texture. Jerry is the measuring stick. But that answer, while not wrong, is not complete. Because Jerry keeps doing things the measuring stick function does not require. He forms real relationships. He has genuine moments of courage. He makes choices, occasionally, that exceed what you would expect from someone whose primary narrative function is to be exceeded by everyone around him. He loves his family in a way that is not ironic or qualified or undermined by the show's usual tendency to complicate every emotional moment with something that makes you uncertain whether you are supposed to feel it. He just loves them. Simply. Without sophistication. Without Rick's analytical distance, or Beth's complicated mixture of devotion and resentment, or Morty's adolescent ambivalence. Jerry loves his family the way someone loves things when they have not spent a lot of time developing a critical relationship with love itself. And the show, even when it is treating him as a punchline, keeps returning to that love as something worth taking seriously. Jerryboree, in this light, is not just a gag. It is the show acknowledging that the multiverse produces Jerry in infinite quantity because the multiverse, whatever else it is doing, keeps generating the specific need that Jerry exists to fill. The need for someone who stays, who comes home, who wants, above everything else, for the people he loves to be okay. In a show full of people moving through the multiverse at extraordinary speed, making extraordinary choices with extraordinary consequences, Jerry is the person who keeps wanting to sit down to dinner with his family at a reasonable hour. The multiverse finds that so consistently necessary that it built a waiting room for him. When Rick and Morty come back for Jerry at the end of the episode, the moment is brief and without ceremony. Rick is not warm about it. The pickup has the same logistical quality as the drop-off. Task completed, Jerry retrieved, moving on. But Jerry's face, in the moment he sees them return, tells you something the rest of the episode has been circling around without landing on. He is glad. Not surprised, not resentful about having been left, not performing the glad in the way people perform emotions for an audience, just genuinely, simply glad that the people he loves came back. That is the entirety of what Jerry wanted from the adventure he was excluded from, for them to come back. And they did. That small moment, lasting only a second or two, sitting between the episode's comedy and its action without drawing attention to itself, is the show's first real argument for what Jerry is and why he matters. He is the person for whom coming back means something. The person whose gladness when the people he loves return is uncomplicated enough to be visible. In a family full of people who guard their feelings behind intelligence and humor and the practiced deflection of people who have learned that wanting things from others tends to cost you, Jerry wants things openly. He is glad when they come back, and you can see it on his face, every time. The question is what that specific, simple, persistent quality of Jerry's emotional life means for the show's larger project. What it means that the multiverse keeps producing this person. What it means that across every dimension Rick has ever visited, in every version of the life his daughter chose, there is almost always a Jerry. Not because he is important in the way Rick is important, but because he is necessary in a way Rick is not. Because someone has to be glad when people come home. And in the Smith household, across every dimension, that someone is almost always Jerry. The show will spend the rest of its run testing that thesis, challenging it, finding versions of Jerry who exceeded it and versions who failed it, finding moments where Jerry's simplicity becomes something more complex, and moments where his complexity resolves back into something almost heartbreakingly simple. But it starts here, in a waiting room, full of identical men, all of them glad, in their various ways, that this section of the adventure involves somewhere to sit down. The Jerrys of the multiverse did not ask for Jerryboree, but they filled it. Because wherever Rick goes, wherever the multiverse branches and diverges and produces its infinite variations on the theme of Rick Sanchez and the chaos he carries with him, there is almost always a Jerry somewhere in the vicinity, waiting. Reading a magazine he is not really reading. Filling out a form with careful, slightly anxious penmanship. Glad, underneath all of it, that someone built this place. Even if the someone who built it did it primarily because dropping Jerry off here was more convenient than the alternative. That is Jerry's relationship with the universe in miniature. A place built for him out of someone else's need, that he fills with something that looks, from the right angle, almost like belonging. Section 2. The original Jerry. Who he is, what he wants, and why that terrifies everyone around him. Jerry is standing by the counter. He is wearing what Jerry wears. He has the expression Jerry has in the mornings, which is the expression of someone who came downstairs hoping for a quiet start to the day and has, once again, not received one. He looks at Rick. He looks at the device. He looks at Beth, who is looking at her father with the complicated mixture of alarm and affection that Beth always has when Rick does something like this. And Jerry says something careful, something that is attempting to be reasonable in a situation that has already exceeded the boundaries of reasonable without pausing to ask permission. Something that, if you were not watching carefully, you might miss entirely because Rick immediately responds to it in a way that makes Jerry's contribution to the conversation feel like a speed bump rather than a point. But it is there. Jerry said something. He is always saying something. The show just rarely stops to let it land. This is where Jerry's story begins, not at Jerryboree, not in any of the multiversal variations the show will eventually introduce. Here, in the pilot episode, in a kitchen on an ordinary morning that has been made extraordinary by the presence of a man who makes every morning extraordinary, whether or not anyone asked him to. Jerry is here. He was here before Rick arrived. He will be here after whatever Rick is doing resolves itself one way or another. He lives in this house. He is married to the woman standing across the kitchen. He is the father of the children who are not yet downstairs, but who will come down and find whatever version of their morning this turns out to be. He is, in every sense that the show is willing to grant him, the man of this house. The problem is that Rick is also here, and Rick does not grant him anything. The relationship between Rick and Jerry is one of the show's foundational dynamics, and the pilot establishes it with a clarity that every subsequent episode builds on without fundamentally changing. Rick finds Jerry inadequate. Not in a complicated way, not with the qualified, ambivalent contempt of someone who recognizes capability in the person they are dismissing and resents it. With the simple, categorical contempt of someone who has assessed a person against a standard the person does not meet and has filed the result under closed. Jerry is not smart enough for Rick, not scientific enough, not capable enough, not interesting enough in any of the ways Rick finds things interesting, which are primarily the ways that involve understanding the universe at a level that Rick himself operates at, and that he has found, across a long life of encountering other people, almost nobody else does. This would be a manageable problem if Rick and Jerry were strangers. But they are not strangers. They are family. Rick's daughter married Jerry. Rick's grandchildren are Jerry's children. The house Rick comes and goes from is the house Jerry has been living in, building a life in, organizing his sense of self around for the entirety of his marriage to Beth. Jerry did not invite Rick into his life. Rick arrived. And the arrival of Rick into the family created a problem for Jerry that goes deeper than simple social discomfort. Because Rick's presence in the household does not just challenge Jerry's authority in the practical sense, though it does that constantly in ways both large and small, it challenges the story Jerry tells himself about who he is. Jerry, in the pilot, is trying. This is the first and most important thing to understand about him. He is not passive. He is not simply accepting the situation with the resigned shrug of someone who has given up on mattering. He is actively, visibly, somewhat desperately, trying to be the person he believes he should be in his own home. He raises concerns. He expresses opinions. He attempts to insert himself into the decision-making around Rick's presence and Rick's activities with the energy of someone who has decided that this time, finally, he is going to hold the line. He does not hold the line. Rick's sheer presence, the weight of his intelligence and his certainty, and the specific force of his personality is not something Jerry has the equipment to resist directly. Not because Jerry is stupid, though the show will spend considerable time implying this, but because the kind of authority Rick projects is not the kind that responds to reasonable objection. It is the kind that simply exists, in the room, at a volume that drowns out everything around it without raising its voice. Jerry's voice, by contrast, is the voice of someone who is not sure they have the right to be speaking, but has decided to speak anyway. And that uncertainty is audible. It is always audible. This is Jerry's foundational problem, and it is not stupidity, and it is not laziness, and it is not any of the simple explanations that Rick's dismissiveness implies. It is confidence. Specifically, the absence of it. Jerry wants the things that most people want: respect, acknowledgement, the sense that the people around him see him clearly and find what they see worthwhile. He wants his marriage to be good, and his children to admire him, and his home to be a place where his presence is felt as an asset rather than an inconvenience. He wants, in the most ordinary possible way, to matter. And the tragedy is not that he does not matter. He does, in the ways that matter. Beth loves him, however complicatedly. His children need him, however ambivalently. The household functions partly because Jerry is in it, doing the unglamorous work of being present and available and reliably there. But Jerry cannot feel any of this clearly, because Rick is also there. And next to Rick, every version of mattering that Jerry has access to looks small. To understand Jerry fully, you need to go back further than Rick. You need to go back to who Jerry was before the show begins, before Rick arrived. Before Beth's complicated feelings about her father created a household that Jerry was always going to be insufficient for. The show gives you this in pieces rather than in a single sustained portrait, but the pieces, assembled, produce something coherent. Jerry was, by the available evidence, a reasonably happy person before the specific configuration of his adult life began to close in around him. He had ambitions. Not extraordinary ones, not the ambitions of someone who looked at the universe and decided to understand all of it, but real ones. He wanted to do something in his professional life that he could be proud of. He wanted to be someone his wife was glad she married. He wanted the ordinary satisfactions of a life that was not spectacular, but that was his, genuinely his, in a way that felt like enough. The show's canon suggests, across multiple episodes, that the gap between that Jerry and the Jerry we meet in the pilot was created by a series of small capitulations rather than a single catastrophic failure. He took the safer job instead of the one he actually wanted at some point. He stayed in the relationship when it was difficult, which is not itself a capitulation, but which produced, in his specific circumstances, a family before he had fully figured out who he was. He let the version of himself that other people expected gradually overlay the version of himself that he had started out as, the way wallpaper goes over old paint, not destroying what is underneath, but making it increasingly inaccessible. By the time the show begins, Jerry is someone who has spent enough years being who he is expected to be that the question of who he might otherwise have been has become genuinely difficult to access, except in flashes. And those flashes are where the show's most interesting Jerry material lives. Season 1, Episode 6, Rick Potion Number 9, is the episode the show built its first real Jerry thesis around. Not the Cronenberg disaster, which is Rick and Morty's plot. Not the dimension-hopping consequences, which reshape the show's entire mythology going forward. The Beth and Jerry plot. While Rick is accidentally making every human being on Earth fall in love with Morty, Jerry is trying to save his marriage. The attempt is not sophisticated. It involves a plan that Jerry clearly thought was romantic and that Beth receives with the specific expression of someone who can see exactly what their partner was trying to do and is moved by the trying even while finding the execution wanting. It involves Jerry being more vulnerable than he usually allows himself to be, in the specific, slightly clumsy way that vulnerability looks when someone has been armoring themselves against it for long enough that removing the armor feels awkward. But here is the thing the episode does that most analyses of it skip past. Jerry succeeds. Not triumphantly, not in the way the episode's A-plot succeeds or fails, but in the quiet, real way that matters for the marriage. He tries. He shows up, imperfectly, with the specific brand of effort that he is capable of producing. And Beth sees it. She sees him trying. And that seeing, that moment of genuine mutual recognition between two people who have spent some portion of their marriage looking past each other, is what the episode is actually about. Jerry's love for Beth is the show's most consistent fact about him. More consistent than his failures at work. More consistent than his complicated relationship with Rick. More consistent than any of the specific Jerry behaviors the show uses to establish him as inadequate in various contexts. He loves her, simply and persistently, and without the analytical distance that might protect him from how much the love costs him when the marriage is difficult. He just loves her. And in a show built around people who have developed, for very good reasons, the ability to maintain emotional distance from the things that matter to them, Jerry's inability to do this is not presented as stupidity. It is presented, however ambivalently, as something close to courage. Jerry's relationship with his children is one of the show's most carefully observed ongoing dynamics. With Summer, Jerry occupies the specific position of the parent who is trying harder than they are succeeding, but whose trying is visible enough that it registers. Summer does not dismiss Jerry the way Rick does. She is frustrated by him sometimes, embarrassed by him sometimes, aware of his limitations in a way that adolescence makes sharp and immediate. But she also defends him. She is, across the show's run, one of the people most likely to notice when Jerry is being treated poorly and to say something about it. This matters, because the defense Summer extends to Jerry is not the defense of someone protecting a weak person out of pity. It is the defense of someone who has seen, inside the household, the specific kind of value Jerry provides, and who has decided that value is worth protecting, even when the household's dominant voice suggests otherwise. With Morty, the dynamic is different and more complicated. Morty loves Jerry with the uncritical warmth that children extend to parents before they have developed the critical apparatus to evaluate them as people. But Morty is also Rick's companion. Morty spends enormous amounts of time with Rick, absorbing Rick's way of looking at the world, Rick's standards for what constitutes intelligence and capability and worth. And Rick's standards are not kind to Jerry. What Morty does with this, how he navigates between loving his father and spending his days with a man who finds his father contemptible, is one of the show's ongoing tensions. It resolves itself differently in different episodes, sometimes landing on the side of Rick's assessment, and sometimes in the episodes where the show is being most honest about what it is doing, landing on the side of something considerably more generous toward Jerry. The show, from its earliest season, established a pattern with Jerry that it would return to throughout its run. The pattern is this: Jerry is set up as inadequate. The episode establishes his limitations. Rick dismisses him. The household treats him as the weak link. The audience is positioned to find him comic. And then Jerry says or does something that is simply true. Something that cuts through the comedy and the dismissal and the carefully maintained hierarchy of who matters in the Smith household and lands with the quiet, undeniable weight of a correct observation made by someone nobody was listening to. These moments are not frequent. The show does not overdo them. If they happened every episode, they would become the new expectation, and the new expectation would become the new thing Jerry failed to meet. But they happen. And they happen specifically because the show understands something about Jerry that Rick, within the fiction, does not. Ordinary people are not wrong about everything. Being the least capable person in a room of extraordinary people does not mean your observations about that room are worthless. It means they come from a different angle. From the perspective of someone who is not so invested in being the smartest person present that they have lost the ability to see what smart is missing. Jerry sees things Rick misses. Not often, not dramatically, but consistently enough that if you watch for it, you notice it. And what he sees, most often, is the human cost of the way Rick operates. The way Rick's adventures damage people who did not sign up for the damage. The way Rick's genius is used as a reason not to examine Rick's choices. The way the household has organized itself around accommodating an extraordinary man at the cost of the ordinary people in it. Jerry notices this, and sometimes, in the quiet moments between the comedy and the adventure, he says so. Nobody tends to listen, but he says it. The original Jerry is not a tragic figure. The show sometimes implies he is. Rick certainly frames him that way. And there is genuine pathos in some of what the show depicts of his life. The unfulfilled ambitions, the marriage that requires constant maintenance, the sense that the gap between who he is and who the people around him need him to be is not something he is going to close. But pathos and tragedy are different things. Tragedy requires a fall. A height from which to fall from, a version of the person that existed before the damage and that the damage destroyed. Jerry does not have that shape. Jerry's story is not a fall. It is a life, messy and ordinary and full of small failures and small victories and the specific, unspectacular love of a man who has decided that the people in his house are the most important thing and has organized the rest of himself around that decision. He is not extraordinary. He is not going to become extraordinary. But he keeps showing up every morning to the kitchen, to the marriage, to the family. And across every dimension the show has ever depicted, across every version of this life and this household and this specific configuration of people trying to exist together under the same roof, that showing up is the most consistent thing Jerry does. More consistent than his failures, more consistent than Rick's contempt, more consistent even than Beth's complicated feelings about what she married and whether it was right. Jerry shows up. Every time. And in a multiverse that is constantly, chaotically producing new versions of everything, the most ordinary thing Jerry does turns out to be the rarest. He stays. Section 3. Every important Jerry variant. How the same man becomes completely different people. They are the same person. They are completely different people. This is the paradox that the multiverse makes literal in Rick and Morty, and that Jerryboree makes visible in a way that the show rarely pauses to examine directly. Because the lobby full of Jerrys is not a lobby full of copies. It is a lobby full of people who all started from the same point and went different directions, shaped by different choices and different circumstances and different versions of the life that the name Jerry Smith describes. The same genetics, the same early history, more or less. The same face looking back from the mirror every morning, and yet, some of them ended up somewhere genuinely different. Some of them are heroes, in the particular, unglamorous way that being a hero looks when you are Jerry Smith rather than Rick Sanchez. Some of them are worse than the Jerry we follow, harder and more bitter and more definitively closed off from the warmth that our Jerry, whatever his failures, keeps reaching toward. Some of them made the same choices our Jerry made and arrived at completely different outcomes because the universe around them responded differently. The variants are not a gimmick. They are the show's argument. About what a person is. About how much of who you are is you, and how much of it is the specific configuration of circumstances that either supported or undermined the person you were trying to become. The Cronenberg Jerry is not shown extensively in the episode. He does not get a sustained arc. But what the show gives you of him, in the brief glimpses available before Rick and Morty abandon this dimension for a new one, is enough to draw some conclusions. Cronenberg Jerry is surviving. This is the first thing worth noting. The world around him has transformed into something genuinely hostile, something that most people, encountering it, would struggle to function inside. And Cronenberg Jerry is functioning. Not thriving, not demonstrating extraordinary capability, but keeping his family alive in a situation that demands exactly the kind of steady, practical, show-up-everyday presence that Jerry, in his best iterations, actually possesses. The Rick and Morty of this dimension are dead. The Jerry is not. This detail sits quietly in the background of the episode's larger implications and rarely gets the attention it deserves. Because what it suggests is that when you remove Rick from the equation, when the household is no longer organized around the gravitational pull of an extraordinary man and his extraordinary problems, Jerry's qualities become the most relevant ones in the room. He is dependable. He does not abandon the family when things get bad. He stays. And in a world that has turned monstrous, staying is not a small thing. The Cronenberg world, for all its horror, accidentally ran an experiment that the show rarely gets to run in the main timeline. What does the Smith household look like when Rick is gone and Jerry is the most capable person present? The answer, however briefly glimpsed, is it survives. The Jerryboree Jerrys represent, in aggregate, the range of outcomes available to a person who started from Jerry's starting point. They are not dramatic departures from each other. The multiverse does not appear to produce versions of Jerry who became, say, great scientists or political leaders or figures of extraordinary public achievement. The range of Jerry variants the show depicts tends to cluster around a specific zone of outcome, ordinary life, in various configurations of better and worse than what our Jerry has managed. This is revealing, because it suggests that what separates the best Jerry variant from the worst is not a single dramatic choice or a single transformative event. It is the accumulation of smaller things. The version of Jerry whose confidence was slightly better supported at a critical moment. The version whose marriage hit a difficult patch at a slightly different time and survived it slightly more intact. The version who had slightly more support for the ambition he had at 22, and therefore arrived at 40 with slightly more of it remaining. Small differences, enormous outcomes. This is the show's most consistent argument about Jerry, running underneath every episode and every variant and every Jerryboree lobby scene. Jerry is not who he is because of who he fundamentally is. He is who he is because of what happened to him. Because of the specific configuration of small circumstances, small victories, and small defeats that shaped the person the genetics and the early history were always capable of becoming. Change enough of those small circumstances and you get a different Jerry. Not a different species, not a fundamentally different being, but a different expression of the same underlying material. A Jerry who is slightly more or slightly less than the one we follow. A Jerry who stayed, or a Jerry who left. The whirly-durly conspiracy Jerry is, in some ways, the show's most complete portrait of what Jerry looks like when the usual constraints are removed. The episode deserves its own section, and it will get one. But in the context of Jerry variants, it is worth noting here what the resort's immortality field does to Jerry's behavior, because it makes him brave. Not wisely brave, not brave in a way that produces good outcomes for anyone. He agrees to participate in an assassination plot against Rick, which is the wrong choice for reasons that include basic ethics and basic self-preservation. He drinks too much. He makes decisions that the sober, cautious, consequence-aware Jerry of the home environment would not make. But the energy underneath those decisions is not malice, it is release. The immortality field removes the thing that constrains Jerry most completely, which is not Rick's presence, and not Beth's expectations, and not the household's assessment of his worth. It is consequences. Jerry, freed from the experience of consequences, even temporarily, becomes a version of himself that is more active and more decisive and more willing to take risks than the Jerry we spend most of the show with. This suggests something important about the other Jerry variants. The ones who diverged most significantly from our Jerry probably diverged at a moment when consequences were temporarily reduced, when a risk that our Jerry did not take was available, and something, maybe a person, maybe a circumstance, maybe simply a different arrangement of morning light on a specific day, made the risk feel manageable. The best Jerry variants are probably the ones who took the risk, who found out because something in their specific configuration of circumstances made it possible to find out that they could survive a certain kind of failure, that the consequences were not, in the end, unsurvivable, and who organized themselves differently afterward. The divorced Jerry is one of the most significant Jerry variants the show produces without leaving the main timeline. Because Season 3 Jerry, the Jerry who is separated from Beth and living in an apartment and navigating the specific, grinding reality of a marriage that has formally ended, is demonstrably different from Season 1 Jerry. Not transformed, not reborn, not dramatically improved or dramatically worsened, but different in the specific ways that significant life change produces difference in people who were always capable of being more than their circumstances allowed. Season 3 Jerry is lonelier. The loneliness is visible, and the show does not pretend it is not. But Season 3 Jerry is also, in certain moments, more himself. Freed from the daily performance of being Beth's husband in a house where Rick is present to make that performance feel inadequate, Jerry discovers something. Not a hidden capability, not a talent that was always there waiting to be unlocked. Something quieter than that. He discovers that he is capable of existing, of waking up in a strange apartment and making decisions about his day, and going out into the world and returning and doing it again the next morning, of being alone with himself for extended periods without falling apart, of wanting things for himself rather than in relationship to what Beth or Rick or the household's collective assessment of his worth suggests he should want. The divorced Jerry is not a success story, but he is a more complete person than the Season 1 Jerry in specific, observable ways. He has been through something, and he came out the other side. Still Jerry, but with the knowledge that he could survive losing the thing he was most afraid to lose. Bethic Twinstinct, Season 6, Episode 3, is the episode that makes the clearest argument for how much Jerry has grown across the show's run. The situation it places him in is designed, structurally, to produce the worst Jerry response. The needy, insecure, unable to handle difficulty Jerry that Season 1 established as his baseline. The Jerry who makes it about himself in the small, exhausting way that people make things about themselves when they have not developed the capacity to hold someone else's experience alongside their own. That Jerry does not entirely appear. What appears instead is someone doing real, visible, effortful work to respond to a genuinely difficult situation with something better than his first instinct. He retreats, he curls up. The initial response is the instinctive one, but he comes back. And when he comes back, he says something to Beth that is honest and vulnerable, and that locates the actual hurt, which is not what she did, but that she hid it from him, that she did not trust him with the truth, that the thing that damaged him was not the situation itself, but the gap the secrecy created between them. That is a sophisticated emotional response. That is a Jerry who has learned something across 6 seasons of being in a difficult marriage, in a difficult household, in a difficult life. That is not the Jerry of the pilot. And the gap between those two Jerrys, the Season 1 Jerry and the Season 6 Jerry, is not filled by a single dramatic transformation. It is filled by the accumulation of exactly what the show has been depicting all along. A man trying. Imperfectly and inconsistently and with regular setbacks, but trying. And getting, in the specific, unspectacular way that trying over a long period produces, slightly better. The Season 7 Jerry is the show's most complete version of him. Not the best version, not the version who has resolved everything and arrived somewhere clean and settled, but the most complete, in the sense of being the version that contains the most of what the full run of the series has deposited in him. The experiences and the failures and the moments of unexpected grace and the ongoing unfinished project of being married to Beth and being father to Morty and Summer and existing in the vicinity of Rick without being destroyed by the proximity. He has been divorced and reconciled. He has been to an alien resort and participated in an assassination plot and survived it. He has watched his family go through things that most families do not go through, and has been, in his way, present for all of it. Not always usefully, not always in the way the situation required, but present. Season 7 Jerry is a man who showed up for 7 seasons. And what showing up does to a person, even an ordinary person, even a person whose showing up was never going to be mistaken for heroism, is accumulate. It just accumulates. And the accumulation is visible in the Season 7 Jerry's face, in the specific way he occupies a room, in the small moments where he does something that the Season 1 Jerry would not have done, and the show does not pause to celebrate, because it does not need to. The audience sees it. That is enough. The most interesting Jerry variant is the one the show never names. Not the Cronenberg Jerry, whose circumstances rather than choices produced his divergence. Not the divorced Jerry, who is still our Jerry navigating a specific chapter of our Jerry's life. Not any of the Jerryboree background figures whose brief screen time suggests entire histories the camera cannot follow. The most interesting variant is the theoretical one. The Jerry who, at some specific moment in his specific history, did not capitulate, who held the line. Not against Rick, not in the dramatic, confrontational sense that the show sometimes sets up and then pulls back from, but against the small, daily, accumulating pressure to be less than whatever he started out as. To accept the version of himself that the people around him reflected back, and to stop reaching toward the version of himself that existed before the reflecting started. The Jerry who kept reaching. The show gives you glimpses of this Jerry. In the moments where our Jerry does something unexpected, where he says the right thing at the right time, or makes a choice that exceeds what anyone expected of him, or simply stays in a situation that most people would find good reason to leave. In those moments, you can see the other Jerry, the one who made different choices, or made the same choices differently, and arrived somewhere that looks, from the outside, like the same life, but that feels, from the inside, like something considerably more his own. The variants the show gives you explicitly, across its run, cluster around specific types. The Cronenberg Jerry who survived when Rick did not. The divorced Jerry discovering what he is without the marriage as his primary identity. The whirly-durly Jerry, briefly freed from consequences and discovering both what that produces and what it costs. The Bethic twin-stinct Jerry, who responded to an impossible situation with something better than his worst self. Each of these is a variation on a theme. Each of them is the show asking the same question in a different register. What is Jerry when you change one variable? What is Jerry when Rick is gone? What is Jerry when the marriage ends? What is Jerry when consequences are suspended? What is Jerry when asked for his best instead of expected to provide his worst? The answers are not consistent with each other, and that inconsistency is the point, because Jerry is not a fixed quantity. He is a person, and people, the show keeps insisting through every Jerry variant it produces, are not fixed quantities. They are the sum of what happened to them and what they did with what happened. Change enough of what happened. Get a different sum. The variants are not the point. The variants are the illustration of the point, which is that Jerry Smith, the most ordinary person in the most extraordinary family in the most chaotic corner of the multiverse, contains within him more range than the show's dominant framing of him as Rick's foil suggests. He can be a survivor when the world turns monstrous. He can be brave when consequences are removed. He can be mature when the situation asks for maturity and he has had enough seasons to develop the capacity to provide it. He can be, in the specific moments the show allows it, exactly what is needed. Not what Rick would provide, not what Beth would provide, not what Morty or Summer or any of the show's more conventionally capable characters would produce in the same situation, but what Jerry provides, which is showing up, staying, loving the people he loves in the uncomplicated, persistent, occasionally exhausting way that ordinary love looks when it is not being performed for an audience that would find it impressive. The variants show you all the different directions this can go, the different configurations of Jerry that the multiverse produces when the variables shift. But running through all of them, visible in every Jerryboree lobby and every alternate dimension and every episode that takes Jerry seriously enough to examine what he is underneath the comedy, is the same thing. A man who wants to be where the people he loves are, who keeps finding his way back to whatever counts as home in his current configuration of life, who shows up. Every variant, every time. In the Cronenberg world when Rick is gone, in the alien resort when the immortality field makes recklessness feel safe, in the apartment when the marriage is over and he is figuring out how to be himself without it, in the kitchen in the morning when another day is starting and the family is about to wake up and come downstairs and need whatever they need, Jerry is there. He was always there. That is the variant the multiverse produces most reliably. Not the genius, not the hero, not the man who changed everything. The man who stayed. In every dimension. Every time. Section 4. Why Jerry always loses. Confidence, dependence, and the architecture of failure. They should not be here together. This is the first thing the scene establishes. Not through dialogue, though the dialogue confirms it quickly enough. Through the body language. Through the specific quality of two people sitting at the same table who have not chosen to sit at the same table, and who are both, in their different ways, managing the discomfort of the unchosen proximity. Rick is here because Morty asked him to take Jerry somewhere, to give him a win. Because Morty, who has been watching his father in the aftermath of the separation with the specific, helpless worry of a child who loves a parent and cannot fix what is wrong with them, decided that what Jerry needed was an adventure. Something to restore the confidence that the divorce and the years before the divorce had quietly and systematically dismantled. Jerry is here because Rick came to get him, which is already, before anything else happens in the episode, a data point. Jerry did not organize this. Jerry did not find a way to take himself somewhere extraordinary. Jerry is here because someone else arranged it. And the someone else arranged it not because they thought Jerry deserved an adventure, but because another someone else asked them to, out of concern for Jerry's mental state. Jerry is the subject of other people's concern. He is not the agent of his own rescue. This is the episode's first and most quietly devastating observation about why Jerry always loses. Not because he is stupid, because he is waiting. The immortality field sequence is the episode's central psychological document, because what it shows you is the specific thing that sits between Jerry and the version of himself that he occasionally glimpses and cannot quite reach. Fear of consequences. Not cowardice in the dramatic sense, not the inability to act when action is required, but the constant, ambient, low-level awareness of consequences that the ordinary person carries through their daily life and that shapes every decision, every risk, every moment of potential boldness, with the quiet question, but what if it goes wrong? Rick does not carry this awareness. Or rather, Rick carries it and has developed, through decades of operating in a multiverse that regularly tries to kill him, the specific kind of relationship with consequence that allows him to assess the risk and proceed anyway. Not because he is unafraid, but because the fear has been integrated into the decision-making rather than preceding it. Jerry has not developed this. Jerry's relationship with consequence is the relationship of someone who has been burned enough times in small enough ways that the memory of the burning precedes every situation before the situation has had a chance to demonstrate whether burning is even possible. He has learned to be careful. The careful is not wrong. The careful kept him in the marriage when the marriage was difficult. The careful kept him showing up to jobs that did not satisfy him because the alternative was uncertainty. The careful is the thing that ensures Jerry is still there, in the kitchen, when everyone comes downstairs. But the careful is also the thing that keeps him from taking the risks that might produce something different, something better, something more his. The immortality field, by temporarily removing the thing that careful is protecting him from, gives Jerry a glimpse of who he might be without it. The glimpse is not entirely flattering. He participates in an assassination plot. He makes decisions he should not make. The version of Jerry that emerges when consequences are suspended is not the best version of Jerry, but it is a more decisive version, a version that acts. And the episode, by showing you this version, is also showing you what Jerry's actual problem is. Not lack of intelligence, not lack of worth. Lack of the specific thing that allows a person to act in the presence of risk. The willingness to be wrong. Rick's speech to Jerry in the jungle is one of the show's most precise character analyses. Not because Rick is right about everything. He is not. Rick is rarely right about everything, and his assessments of other people, however sharp, are always filtered through the specific distortions of his own psychology. But he is right about some things. He tells Jerry that he manipulates people by appearing weak, that the helplessness is a strategy, however unconscious, for getting others to carry weight that Jerry should be carrying himself. That Beth did not choose Jerry so much as get maneuvered into a position where choosing Jerry felt like the responsible option. This is cruel. It is also, in the specific way that cruel observations sometimes are, partially true. Jerry's dependence is not entirely innocent. The show has shown you enough of it, across enough episodes, to make Rick's reading of it land with some weight. There is a version of Jerry's neediness that is genuinely manipulative, not in the calculated sense, but in the way that any sustained pattern of behavior that produces specific results in other people eventually becomes, however unconsciously, a strategy. Jerry leans on people. He always has. And the leaning produces responses. People accommodate him. People make decisions on his behalf. People, as Morty did at the episode's beginning, arrange things for him because he is not quite arranging them for himself. The leaning is not malicious, but it is a pattern. And Rick, whatever else he is wrong about, is right that the pattern has costs. Jerry's professional life is the show's most sustained argument for why his pattern of dependence developed in the first place. He works in advertising. He is not the most capable person in his workplace. He is not the least capable. He exists in the middle, in the specific, uncomfortable zone of people who are good enough to continue being employed and not good enough to be considered for the things that would make the employment feel meaningful. He knows this. The episodes that spend time in his workplace make clear that Jerry is under no illusions about his standing. He is not deluded about his professional position the way he is occasionally deluded about his position in the household. He knows where he is in the office hierarchy. He has absorbed this knowledge and organized his behavior around it, with the quiet resignation of someone who decided, at some point, that working within the limits of what was on offer was preferable to reaching for something that might not be there. The reaching, in Jerry's professional history, did not go well. The show gives you this in fragments, a reference here, an implication there. The portrait that assembles itself is of a man who had genuine ambition at some earlier point, who encountered enough resistance to that ambition to conclude that the resistance was informative rather than circumstantial, and who scaled back his expectations to fit what the resistance suggested was realistic. This is the specific, quiet, extremely common way that ordinary people become less than they were capable of being. Not through a single catastrophic failure, through the accumulation of smaller ones, each one suggesting the same thing. This is not for you. And Jerry, who was always going to be more susceptible to that suggestion than someone with Rick's impervious self-belief, listened. The thing the show gets right about Jerry, and even its most comic depictions of his failure, is that it never lets you forget why he is trying. He is always trying for someone. For Beth, for Morty, for Summer, for the version of his family that he wants to be worthy of and that keeps moving slightly ahead of where he currently is. The failure is real. The love driving the attempt is also real. And the specific quality of Jerry's losing, the thing that makes it different from the losing of a character the show simply wants you to find pathetic, is that the losing is always in the service of something genuine. He fails at being impressive. He fails at being capable. He fails at being the kind of man that Rick, or the household's ambient Rick-shaped standard, would recognize as adequate. But he does not fail at trying. He never stops trying. And the trying, however inadequate it looks from the outside, is the show's most consistent argument that Jerry is more than the sum of his failures. Because failing while trying is different from not trying. It is considerably more expensive, emotionally. It costs something every time to reach for something and not quite get there. And Jerry keeps paying that cost, every episode, without accumulating the protective cynicism that might make the paying less painful. He keeps trying as if the next attempt might be the one that works, as if the gap between who he is and who he wants to be is closable, as if the love driving the attempt is enough, by itself, to eventually produce the result. The whirly-dirly conspiracy ends without resolution. Rick and Jerry do not become friends. The household does not reorganize itself around a new understanding of what Jerry is worth. The fundamental dynamic between them does not change, but the episode deposits something in both of them. Rick knows now that Jerry is capable of being moved by an honest conversation, that underneath the dependence and the manipulation and all the things Rick finds contemptible about him, Jerry is listening. That the words Rick said in the jungle, as cruel as they were, reached something real. Jerry knows now that Rick said them, not to be cruel exactly, because they were true. And that truth, however painful, is more respect than Rick usually offers. The knowledge does not fix anything, but it changes something. And the something it changes is small and unspectacular, and entirely in keeping with how change actually works in people who are not going to transform dramatically. Jerry goes home, and he knows a little more about why he loses than he did when the episode started, which is not the same as winning, but it is not nothing. The show has been building, across every episode and every failure and every moment of comedy at Jerry's expense, toward a specific question that this section has been circling. Not why does Jerry lose, but what does losing cost him? And the answer, visible in his face at the end of the whirly-dirly conspiracy, and in every episode that has put him through something and watched him come out the other side, still Jerry, still trying, still reaching for the people he loves with the same unguarded enthusiasm that has made him a target for dismissal across 7 seasons, is this: everything. It costs him everything, every time, and he keeps paying it. Because the people he is paying it for are worth it, to him, even when he is the only one in the room who thinks so. That is not stupidity. That is the specific, unglamorous, entirely unsung form of courage that ordinary people practice every day in the absence of anyone noticing. Jerry loses. He always loses. And he always shows up the next morning to try again. In every dimension, without exception. The multiverse has never produced a Jerry who stopped trying, only Jerrys who tried differently. And the difference between those Jerrys and ours is not in the trying. It is in what the trying eventually taught them about themselves, and what they were willing to do with the knowledge. Section 5. The strongest Jerry. Why everyone underestimates him. The strongest Jerry moments in the show are never the ones that look like strength. They do not arrive with music or with the camera slowing down or with the other characters turning to acknowledge that something significant just happened. They arrive the way genuinely strong things often arrive in real life, quietly, without announcement, in the middle of conversations that seem to be about something else. And then they land. And you realize that what you just watched was not the show's weakest character having a lucky moment. It was a person doing what that person actually does best, seeing something clearly and saying it. The strongest Jerry is not the Jerry who wins a fight or outsmarts Rick or demonstrates some hidden competence that reframes everything you thought you knew about him. The strongest Jerry is the Jerry who says the true thing in the room that everyone else has been carefully avoiding, who names what is actually happening, who looks at a complicated situation and cuts through the complexity to the human reality underneath it. Not because he is smarter than Rick, but because he is less invested in being right than Rick is. And the difference between those two things is larger than it looks. Something Ricked This Way Comes, Season 1, Episode 9, gives you one of the show's earliest arguments for why Jerry is more than he appears. The Pluto subplot is set up as comedy. Jerry believes Pluto is a planet. Science has reclassified it. Jerry is wrong in a way that is supposed to be funny. Another data point in the show's ongoing portrait of a man who is confidently incorrect about things that people with more education or more intellectual rigor would get right. And then the show takes Jerry and Summer to Pluto, where they discover that the scientific reclassification of Pluto was not, in this dimension, a matter of dispassionate scientific consensus. It was the product of political pressure from the plutonian mining industry, which had financial reasons to prefer a definition of planet that excluded Pluto because the reclassification served their economic interests. Jerry was right. Not because he understood the science better than the scientists, but because his instinct, his simple, unexamined conviction that Pluto felt like a planet and that the reclassification felt wrong, pointed at something real that the official consensus had papered over for reasons that had nothing to do with the truth. The show plays this carefully. It does not turn Jerry into a secret genius. It does not suggest that his method of arriving at correct conclusions, through feeling rather than analysis, through instinct rather than evidence, is superior to Rick's method. But it demonstrates something important. Being right does not require being right for the right reasons. And Jerry, who is wrong about many things in many episodes, is occasionally right about things in a way that matters. Not because he figured it out, because he felt it and trusted the feeling enough to say so. The Old Man in the Seat, Season 4, Episode 2, is structured as a story about Rick protecting his privacy and punishing Jerry for violating it. On the surface, it is exactly that. But underneath the surface, it is doing something considerably more interesting. Because the episode reveals that Rick has a secret place, a private place, a location he goes to that is not about science or adventure or the ongoing project of being the most capable being in any room he enters. A place he goes simply to be. And Jerry finds it. Jerry, who is supposed to be the person in the household who has no access to the real Rick, who exists on the permanent outside of whatever genuine interior life Rick maintains beneath the performance, stumbles into the most private corner of that interior life through the specific, accidental quality of Jerry's navigation through the world, which is that he goes places without quite thinking about where he is going, and finds things he was not looking for. The episode does not let this be transformative. Rick punishes Jerry for the intrusion, and the punishment is petty and disproportionate in the way Rick's punishments of Jerry tend to be petty and disproportionate. But the moment of finding is there. Jerry, in that bathroom, understood something about Rick that very few beings in the multiverse ever get close enough to understand. That Rick, for all his contempt of ordinary life, has organized a private corner of himself around something that looks very much like the ordinary life he holds in contempt. A quiet place. A moment of simple, unextraordinary peace. The strongest Jerry does not use this knowledge as a weapon. He does not take it back to Beth or to Morty or to anyone who might find it useful. He just carries it, quietly. The way ordinary people carry the complicated things they have learned about the people they live alongside. The strongest Jerry is not a single episode's achievement. He is the product of the whole run, the accumulation of everything the show put him through and watched him survive. Not survive triumphantly, not survive in a way that produced speeches or celebrations or moments of acknowledged growth that the other characters witnessed and remarked upon. Survive quietly, in the specific, unspectacular way that ordinary people survive the things that happen to them, by continuing, by showing up the next day, by finding enough reason in the daily texture of their lives to keep going without requiring that the going produce something extraordinary. The strongest Jerry is the one who is still there in Season 7. After the Cronenberg world and Jerryboree and the alien resort and the divorce and the reconciliation and Bethic twinstinct and everything else the show has deployed against him. Still in the kitchen, still trying to make breakfast, still, in the specific way that only becomes visible across a long enough viewing of the series, choosing to be present in a family that regularly makes it difficult to be present without a very good reason. Jerry's reason is simple. He loves them, and the love has survived everything the show has done to test it. That is strength. Not the kind that looks like strength from the outside. Not the kind Rick would recognize as strength, because Rick's definition of strength is organized around capability and intelligence and the ability to dominate situations through sheer force of understanding. But the kind that actually is strength. The endurance kind. The showing up kind. The I will be here tomorrow kind. The Rick-Churian. Morty date. Season 3, Episode 10 is the episode that the show built its first explicit Jerry vindication around. And it is worth sitting with, because what it vindicates is not what most vindication stories vindicate. It does not vindicate Jerry's intelligence. He does not outsmart anyone. He does not demonstrate hidden scientific capability or strategic brilliance or any of the qualities the show's established hierarchy would recognize as making him more than he appeared. It vindicates his ordinariness, his specific, cultivated, long-practiced ability to be a reasonable person in an unreasonable situation. The President of the United States is, in this episode, being unreasonable. Rick and Morty are, in their own ways, being unreasonable. The situation has the specific quality of two extraordinary entities and one political institution all failing to navigate a conflict because none of them have the ability to simply be normal about it. And Jerry walks in, and is normal about it. He does not have a plan. He does not have a strategy. He does not have the specific, calculated approach that a smarter person might have developed in advance. He just says what is true, calmly, without the ego that prevents Rick from saying it, or the adolescent anxiety that prevents Morty from saying it, or the political calculation that prevents the president from saying it. Just the truth, clearly stated, by the least impressive person in the building. And it works. The strongest Jerry does not know he is the strongest Jerry. This is the detail the show consistently gets right, and that most analysis of Jerry consistently gets wrong. Jerry's most capable moments are not produced by Jerry deciding to be capable. They are not the result of Jerry psyching himself up or accessing some reserve of confidence he has been building toward. They arrive without premeditation, in the spaces between his more effortful attempts at adequacy, produced by the same quality that makes him easy to underestimate. He is not performing. In the moments when Jerry is at his most effective, he is simply being Jerry, without the anxiety that comes from trying to be impressive, without the self-consciousness that comes from knowing you are being assessed against a standard, without the specific, counterproductive effort of a person who is trying very hard to demonstrate that they are capable of things. He is just there, saying what is true, doing what the situation requires, without the weight of his own self-evaluation getting in the way. And in those moments, the quality that has been the source of his weakness across every episode, the unguarded, undefended, unreflective quality of someone who has not developed the armor that more capable people develop against a world that regularly disappoints them, becomes the source of something else entirely. Clarity. The specific clarity of someone who sees the situation without the distortion of needing to win it. The strongest Jerry is the one who is not trying to be strong, who is simply, in the specific way that is only available to people who have stopped organizing their behavior around how they appear, present, in the room, seeing what is there, saying what is true. And occasionally, in the moments when truth is the thing the situation most requires, and the more capable people in the room are too invested in something else to provide it, being exactly what was needed, without knowing it, without needing anyone to tell him, without waiting for someone to come and collect him from the lobby and take him somewhere he can be useful. Just there, being Jerry. Which turns out, across a long enough viewing of the show, to be more than anyone gave him credit for, including, sometimes, himself. Section 6. Rick's biggest rival. Why Jerry threatens everything Rick built. Rick is afraid of Jerry. Not in the way Rick is afraid of the Galactic Federation or the Citadel of Ricks, or any of the genuinely dangerous entities the show has placed in his path across 7 seasons. Not the fear that produces adrenaline and contingency planning and the specific, focused energy of someone navigating a situation that could kill them. Something quieter than that. Something Rick has never named directly and the show has never announced explicitly. But it is there. Running underneath every dismissal, every cutting remark, every elaborate demonstration that Jerry is inadequate and beneath consideration. Running underneath the whirly-durly monologue and the Jerryboree drop-offs and every moment Rick has engineered to place himself above Jerry in the household's invisible hierarchy. The fear is not of Jerry's capability. Rick is not afraid that Jerry will outsmart him or outbuild him or demonstrate some hidden genius that reframes Rick's position in the family. Rick is afraid of what Jerry represents. And what Jerry represents to Rick is the life Rick chose not to live. Rick C-137 made a choice. The show has established this across multiple seasons, and the season 5 and 6 arcs filled in the specific shape of it. He chose, at the foundational moment of his adult life, to stay, to build the garage, to be in the family rather than in the multiverse as a free agent. He chose the specific, contained, vulnerable life of someone who allows other people to matter that much. And then he lost it. The bomb came through the portal, and it destroyed the specific thing he had chosen over the multiverse. And Rick rebuilt himself. Across 30 years of grief and adventure and the construction of the persona the show follows, around the absence of that thing, around the wound. The Rick the show depicts is not a man who has never experienced the ordinary life Jerry lives. He is a man who chose it, lost it, and has spent decades convincing himself and everyone around him that the loss was a confirmation that the choice was wrong. That connection is weakness. That the ordinary life, the family and the dinner table, and the person who is glad when you come home, is a trap rather than a gift. That being free of it is better than being inside it. Jerry, every single day, in the kitchen, in the marriage, in the specific, unglamorous, ongoing project of being a present father and an imperfect husband, and a man whose life is organized around the people he loves, is a living argument against everything Rick has built his post-Diane existence on. Jerry chose what Rick lost, and Jerry is still choosing it, every morning in the kitchen. That is what Rick cannot stand. The speed of Rick's contempt for Jerry is the tell. It arrives too fast. Not because Rick has already assessed Jerry carefully and reached a considered conclusion, but because Rick arrived at the Smith household with a conclusion already formed, with a relationship to the category of person Jerry represents that was established before Jerry specifically entered the picture. Jerry is the man who married Beth. Beth is the daughter Rick chose, at the pivotal moment of his arc, to come back to. And coming back to Beth meant entering a world that was already organized, that already had a structure, that already had a person at its center who was not Rick, who had built a life with Rick's daughter and Rick's grandchildren, and who occupied in the household Rick was returning to the specific relational position that Rick's original choice, the choice to stay and build the family, was supposed to produce. Rick came back to a family. The family already had a father, and that father was Jerry. Beth is the fulcrum. The show has always known this. It has organized the Rick-Jerry dynamic around Beth since the pilot, because the conflict between Rick and Jerry is not really about Rick and Jerry. It is about Beth. About who Beth chooses, about what Beth needs from the people in her life and which of the two men at the center of her adult existence is actually providing it. Rick offers Beth something Jerry cannot provide: brilliance. The specific, intoxicating experience of being in proximity to someone who operates at a level the rest of the world cannot follow. The sense that her own intelligence, which is considerable and which the show makes clear exceeds what her domestic circumstances have required of it, is recognized and matched. The feeling of being Rick Sanchez's daughter, which is a complicated feeling, but one that carries, underneath all its complications, a specific kind of significance. Jerry offers Beth something Rick cannot provide: constancy. The specific, unspectacular, deeply necessary experience of being with someone who is not going to disappear into the multiverse tomorrow, who is not going to make her complicit in something morally questionable before breakfast, who is not going to turn every ordinary moment into a reminder of how extraordinary he is and how ordinary everything around him is by comparison, who simply, reliably, is there. The marriage between Beth and Jerry is not a mistake the show is building toward correcting. It is the show's central argument about what people need from their relationships. Not just brilliance, not just constancy, both. In some configuration that the show spends 7 seasons watching Beth try to find. The Bethic twinstinct resolution is Rick and Morty's most explicit argument for what Jerry actually contributes to the marriage. He makes it survivable. Not through capability or through intelligence or through any of the qualities Rick would recognize as making him useful, but through the specific quality that has been his most consistent feature across every episode and every Jerry variant and every Jerryboree lobby and every moment of failure and every moment of unexpected strength. He cares more about the relationship than he cares about being right about the relationship. In the resolution scene, Jerry has every reason to make what happened about himself. The situation, objectively, involves something that was done to him, or near him, or in the vicinity of his marriage without his knowledge or consent. He has grounds for the specific, elaborate grievance that people construct when they have been wronged and want to make sure everyone understands the scale of the wronging. He does not do this. He listens. He acknowledges that his own hurt, real as it is not the only thing in the room. He makes space, in the middle of his own injury, for the experience of the people who caused it. This is not weakness. It is the most demanding thing the show has ever asked of him, and he does it, without training, without the philosophical framework Rick would bring to the same situation, reducing it to an intellectual problem with an optimal solution. Without Beth's clinical detachment, without any of the protective mechanisms the show's more capable characters have developed to manage emotional situations without being fully exposed to them. Just Jerry, fully exposed, choosing the marriage over being right about it. Rick's relationship with Jerry does not resolve. The show is too honest about both of them to give you a resolution that would require either of them to become something they are not. Rick does not come to genuinely respect Jerry in the way that Jerry would recognize as respect. Jerry does not stop being the kind of person who activates Rick's specific, particular contempt. But something accumulates. Across 7 seasons of being in the same house, in the same family, and the same recurring crises, in the same kitchen, in the same mornings, something deposits itself between them that is not affection, and is not understanding, and is not anything that either of them would name if asked. It is the specific, wordless acknowledgement that forms between people who have been through a lot in proximity to each other, who have seen each other at their worst, and their most ridiculous, and their most unexpectedly capable, who have, despite everything, not managed to be rid of each other. Rick is still there, Jerry is still there, and the dynamic between them, for all that it is never resolved into anything comfortable, has produced across 7 seasons the closest thing Rick C137 has to a sustained relationship with someone who is not family by blood or adventure. Jerry is Rick's rival, not for intelligence, not for capability, for Beth, for the family, for the right to occupy the center of the household that Rick returned to and that Jerry had already built before he arrived. That rivalry has never been settled. It will probably never be settled, because the thing they are competing for, Beth's genuine, uncomplicated, uncaveated love is something that neither of them has ever fully had, and both of them, in their completely different ways, keep reaching for it. Rick, through brilliance and adventure and the specific, complicated gift of being extraordinary in the vicinity of people who love extraordinary things. Jerry, through presence and constancy and the specific, ordinary gift of being there every morning, in the kitchen, still trying, still staying, still, after everything, glad when the people he loves come home. Section 7. What Jerry really represents: normality, family, and why the multiverse keeps making him. Jerry's deepest fear is losing his family. Not losing them to death or to some cosmic threat or to any of the genuinely extraordinary dangers the show has placed them in across 7 seasons. Losing them in the ordinary way. The way families are lost when the people inside them grow apart. When the love that organized the household around a shared center quietly, gradually, without announcement, stops being enough to hold the center. Jerry is afraid of being left, of waking up one morning and finding that the people he built his life around have moved on to something that does not include him. That the marriage finally resolves into the ending it has been approaching and retreating from across the entire series. That his children grow into adults who find, in the process of growing, that the version of their father they needed was the version from childhood, and that the adult version has nothing left to offer. That he becomes, finally and conclusively, optional. The fear is not dramatic. It is the most ordinary fear in the world. And the show, in Fear No Mort, Season 7, Episode 4, presents it without irony or comedy or the usual machinery of Jerry as punchline. It simply shows you what Jerry is afraid of losing. And by showing you what he is afraid of losing, it shows you what he has. A family. Real and imperfect and constantly in the process of being lost and recovered and lost again. But his. And the fear of losing it is proportional to the love of having it. Which means Jerry loves his family with everything he has. Which has always been the show's most consistent fact about him, and which, in the context of everything this documentary has examined, is the thing that makes him more than a punchline. More than a foil, more than the measuring stick against which Rick's genius is made legible. What does Jerry represent? The question has been building across every section of this documentary, through the Jerryboree lobby and the Cronenberg world and the alien resort and the divorce and the reconciliation and every moment of failure and every moment of unexpected strength. Through the Rick-Jerry dynamic and the Beth-Jerry marriage and the parent-child relationships and the brief, revealing glimpses of what Jerry is when the usual constraints are removed. The answer the show has been constructing, across 7 seasons and infinite dimensions, is not simple, but it is honest. Jerry represents the choice most people make. Not the choice Rick made, not the choice Evil Morty made, not the choice any of the show's more dramatically compelling characters made when faced with the question of what to do with the life available to them. The choice to stay inside the ordinary, to build something small and specific and vulnerable, rather than something large and extraordinary and self-sufficient. To allow other people to matter that much. To organize your sense of yourself around a family, rather than around your own capability. To wake up every morning and choose, again, the specific, expensive, entirely unspectacular love of people who are difficult, and who require things from you, and who will not always appreciate what you provide, and who you will sometimes fail, and who will sometimes fail you, and who are, for all of that, the reason you get up. Jerry chose this. Every Jerry, across every dimension, in every Jerryboree lobby, in every version of the life the multiverse produces, made some version of this choice. Not always well, not always successfully, not always in a way that produced the outcomes the choice was supposed to produce. But the choice itself, the fundamental orientation toward the ordinary and the particular and the human, over the extraordinary and the cosmic and the self-sufficient, is the most consistent thing the multiverse produces. More consistent than Rick's genius, more consistent than Morty's adventure, more consistent even than Beth's complicated, unresolved hunger for something more than what the domestic life offered her. Jerry, choosing to stay every time. The Jerryboree lobby is not a waiting room for the inadequate. It is a waiting room for people who chose something that required waiting, who chose lives that included other people's schedules and other people's needs and the specific ongoing accommodation of being in relationship with human beings who do not always do what you hoped they would do or be what you needed them to be. Who chose, in the language the show has been speaking across 7 seasons without quite using these words, love. The ordinary kind. The kind that does not produce adventures or transform the multiverse or leave a mark on the infinite branching structure of possible dimensions. The kind that produces breakfast and presence at school events and being in the kitchen when someone comes downstairs and being glad when people come home. The Jerrys in that lobby chose that. All of them. In every dimension. With every variation the multiverse introduced into their specific circumstances. They chose it, and they are waiting for it to come back to them. Because that is what you do when you have chosen something worth waiting for. You wait. Across an infinite number of universes, the multiverse keeps making Rick Sanchez, keeps making Morty, keeps making Beth, brilliant and hungry and never quite satisfied with the life available to her. And it keeps making Jerry. Not because Jerry is exceptional, because Jerry is necessary. Because in every universe where Rick's genius tears through the fabric of ordinary life, someone has to hold the ordinary together. Someone has to be in the kitchen. Someone has to go to the school events and fill out the paperwork and be the person who is simply, reliably, unglamorously there when the adventure is over and the portal closes and everyone comes home needing something that the multiverse cannot provide. Something that only the ordinary can provide. The specific gravity of a life that stays in one place long enough for people to come back to it. The multiverse does not keep making Jerry because it does not know any better. It keeps making Jerry because it understands something that Rick, for all his genius, has spent 30 years trying not to understand. That the ordinary life is not the consolation prize. It is the thing, the actual thing. That all the adventure and genius and multiversal chaos is orbiting around. The kitchen in the morning. The people you love coming downstairs. The specific, unremarkable, entirely irreplaceable gladness of someone who stayed. Jerry stayed. He always stays. In every dimension. Every time. And in a multiverse that is infinite and indifferent and full of beings who chose something larger than themselves, that staying is not small. It is the most human thing the show has ever depicted. Quietly, without announcement, in the kitchen, every morning. Still there. Section 8. The Jerry nobody talks about. What happens when ordinary life becomes extraordinary pressure? The Galactic Federation occupation of Earth is the show's most sustained experiment in what the Smith household looks like without Rick. And what it reveals about Jerry is not what anyone would have predicted. Jerry adapts. Not heroically, not in the way that produces speeches or dramatic moments or the kind of visible capability that the show usually reserves for its more conventionally impressive characters. But practically, quietly, in the specific, unglamorous way that ordinary people adapt to extraordinary circumstances when the extraordinary people around them are not available to take over. He figures out how to exist inside the new system. He understands faster than Beth does in some respects, that the Federation's occupation has created a specific set of incentives, and that navigating those incentives requires the specific skill set that Jerry has been developing across his entire adult life. The skill of existing inside a structure that does not particularly value you, of finding the available leverage and using it without drawing attention to the using, of being, in the specific way that people who have spent years being underestimated develop, invisible enough to move. Jerry has been practicing this inside the Smith household for years. The Galactic Federation, it turns out, is not that different from Rick. Large, powerful, organized around a set of values that do not naturally include Jerry's contributions in their accounting, inclined to dismiss him before assessing him. Jerry knows how to live inside that. He has been doing it his whole adult life. The occupation arc is brief. Rick returns and the Federation is dismantled, and the household reorganizes itself around Rick's presence with the speed of a system snapping back to its default configuration. But the brief window where Jerry was the most capable person navigating the Smith household's immediate circumstances deposits something that the show carries forward, even after Rick's return makes it irrelevant again. The knowledge that Jerry can do it. That when the specific pressure of Rick's presence is removed, when the measuring stick against which Jerry is always found inadequate is not in the room, Jerry has resources. Not Rick's resources, his own. The ones he developed in the specific school of being ordinary in an extraordinary household. The ones produced by years of finding ways to be useful in a context that was not designed around his usefulness. The ones that look, from inside the Smith household's usual hierarchy, like nothing much. And that look, from inside a Galactic Federation occupation, like exactly what the situation requires. Star Mort Rickturn of The Jerry, Season 4, Episode 10, is the episode that most explicitly tests Jerry's physical courage. And what it shows you is not a hidden action hero. It shows you a frightened man making himself do things anyway. This is a more honest depiction of courage than the show usually produces for its more capable characters. Rick's courage, such as it is, exists in a context of such extraordinary capability that the courage itself becomes difficult to distinguish from competence. Rick is not afraid of most things because Rick has the tools to handle most things. Jerry does not have those tools. Jerry is afraid, and he does the things anyway. Not because he has suppressed the fear or processed it into something else, but because the people he loves are in the situation with him, and the calculation is simple, however frightening. He cannot leave them. He will not leave them. So he does what needs doing. Frightened. Imperfectly. Without the elegance that Rick would bring to the same situation. But present. The way Jerry is always present when the people he loves need him to be. The thing nobody talks about when they talk about Jerry is the endurance. Not the moments of unexpected competence, not the brief windows when Rick is absent and Jerry's ordinary skills become relevant, not the specific, scattered episodes where Jerry does something that exceeds what was expected of him. The years. The accumulated, unspectacular years of staying inside a family that regularly communicates, through Rick's presence and through the household's ambient culture of Rick worship, that Jerry's contributions are not the contributions the family most values. Most people, subjected to that consistent communication over a long enough period, would update their self-assessment to match it, would internalize the message, would become, gradually, the person the message described. Jerry has not done this, not fully. He doubts himself constantly. The self-doubt is visible, and the show does not pretend it is not. He carries the weight of years of being found inadequate in ways that shape his behavior and his relationship with risk, and his tendency toward the dependence that Rick correctly identifies as a pattern. But underneath the self-doubt, something has not updated. Some part of Jerry that knew, before Rick arrived and before the household established its hierarchy, and before every dinner table became a referendum on Jerry's worth, that he was a person whose presence mattered. That part has not changed. It keeps showing up, every morning, in the kitchen, choosing the family, against all the evidence that the family would function fine without him, against Rick's explicit, repeated, entirely confident assessment that the family would function better without him, against the specific, grinding pressure of years of being the least impressive person in a household organized around impressiveness. Jerry keeps choosing them. The Jerry nobody talks about is the one who held it together. Not dramatically. Not in any single moment that the show would slow down and underscore. But across the full run of the series, in the accumulated weight of every morning and every dinner and every school event, and every moment of crisis where Jerry was present and imperfect and there. The family survived. Not because of Rick's genius. Rick's genius produced as many crises as it resolved, and the show has never pretended otherwise. Not because of Beth's capability. Beth is formidable, and her contributions to the family's survival are real, and the show honors them. But Beth's complicated relationship with her own needs and her father's presence, and the life she might have led, have made her as much a source of the family's difficulty as its resolution. The family survived, in part, because Jerry kept choosing it, kept showing up to the marriage when the marriage was difficult, kept being the parent at the events, kept making the breakfast, kept being glad when people came home. The show gave him very little credit for this across its run. The characters inside it gave him even less. But the family is still there, in Season 7, still intact in its imperfect, complicated, Rick-adjacent way, still organizing itself around the kitchen and the morning and the ordinary texture of daily life. And Jerry is still in it, still present, still choosing it, every day. That is the Jerry nobody talks about, the one who was there the whole time, holding the ordinary together while the extraordinary threatened to pull everything apart. The one whose most significant contribution to the show's central family was one that required no genius and no adventure and no moment of dramatic capability. Just the decision, repeated every morning, to stay, to be there, to be glad when people came home. Across an infinite number of universes, the multiverse will keep making Ricks, brilliant and damaged and carrying the specific wound of a man who chose the ordinary and lost it, and has spent 30 years building an extraordinary life around the loss. It will keep making Mortys, young and impressionable, and slowly, across the chaos of their adventures, becoming something more than what they started as. It will keep making Beths, brilliant and hungry and never quite satisfied and never quite giving up on the version of the life that might, finally, be enough. And it will keep making Jerrys, because the multiverse understands something that the Smith household takes 7 seasons to begin to understand, that the extraordinary needs somewhere to come home to, that the genius needs someone who will be glad when it walks through the door, that the adventure needs an ordinary life waiting at the end of it. Not because the ordinary life is more important than the extraordinary, but because without it, the extraordinary is just movement, just motion through a multiverse that does not hold still long enough to matter. Jerry is what makes it matter, not through genius, through presence, through the specific, daily, unglamorous, entirely irreplaceable choice to stay inside the ordinary and hold it together and be there, every morning, in the kitchen, still glad, still home, still Jerry, in every universe, without exception. Because some things the multiverse cannot afford to run out of. An ordinary love, shown up for every day, in the specific and unspectacular way that only ordinary people can show up for it, is one of them. Fade to silence. Section 9. Jerry Across the Seasons. How one man's journey mirrors the show's own growth. The show changed across 7 seasons. Not in its premise, not in the fundamental DNA of what Rick and Morty is, the mixture of science fiction adventure and family drama, and the specific dark comedy of extraordinarily intelligent people doing extraordinarily damaging things and then going home for dinner. That remained constant. but in its relationship to its own characters, in the level of seriousness it was willing to extend to the people inside it, in how much it was willing to admit that the comedy had weight underneath it. And nowhere is this evolution more visible than in what the show did with Jerry across 7 seasons. Season 1 Jerry is a punchline with feelings attached. Season 7 Jerry is a person the show has spent years learning to see clearly. The distance between those two Jerrys is not just character development in the conventional sense. It is the show developing the capacity to look at what it had built and find, in the looking, something it had not quite intended to put there. Something true. Season 1 uses Jerry primarily as contrast. He exists in the show's first season to make Rick legible. Without Jerry's ordinary failures, Rick's extraordinary capability would have less texture. Without Jerry's dependence, Rick's self-sufficiency would have less to define itself against. Without Jerry's emotional transparency, Rick's emotional armor would have less to push back on. Jerry in Season 1 is a function as much as a character. And the show, to its credit, seems to know this. Because even in Season 1, in the episodes where Jerry is most purely a punchline, something keeps breaking through. The love. It breaks through in Rick Potion number 9, in the B-plot where Jerry and Beth reach for each other across the distance the marriage has accumulated. It breaks through in Lawnmower Dog, in the small moments between Jerry and his children that the show plays for warmth between the comedy. It breaks through in Something Ricked This Way Comes, in the Pluto subplot that accidentally vindicates Jerry without the show quite being ready to fully commit to the vindication. The love keeps breaking through, because the show put it there, and having put it there, could not quite contain it within the comedy that was supposed to frame it. Season 2 is where the show begins its slow, largely unannounced recalibration of what Jerry is for. The Whirly-Durly conspiracy does not air until Season 3, but its roots are in the Season 2 episodes that start treating Jerry's emotional life as something other than a source of comedy. Season 2, Episode 9, Look Who's Purging Now, puts Jerry in a subplot that requires him to navigate a genuine ethical question. Not a Rick-level ethical question, not the kind of galaxy-spanning moral calculation that the show's adventures typically produce. A small, human, specific ethical question about honesty and kindness and what you owe the people you love when the honest answer is also the hurtful one. Jerry handles it imperfectly, but the show takes the imperfection seriously, does not use it as a punchline, lets it be what it is. A man trying to do right by the people he loves and not quite getting it right, which is a description that fits most people most of the time. And the show, in that Season 2 episode, starts to treat Jerry like most people, rather than like a device for making Rick look good by comparison. Season 3 Jerry is the show's first full commitment to Jerry as a character rather than a function. The divorce arc requires the show to follow Jerry into a space the Smith household cannot contain, into the apartment, into the daily reality of a life being rebuilt from a foundation that just collapsed, into the specific, unspectacular challenge of being alone with yourself when you are not sure you like the person you find there. And what Season 3 discovers in following Jerry into this space is something that changes how the show handles him going forward. Jerry is more interesting without the household's usual frame. Not more capable, not more impressive, but more legible as a person, more three-dimensional, more available to the audience's genuine attention rather than the audience's amused tolerance. The divorce arc does not redeem Jerry. It reveals him, shows you the specific texture of who he is when the relationship that has defined him is not available to define him, when he has to find out what remains when the husband and father frame is removed. What remains is smaller than Rick would grant it, and larger than the comedy ever suggested. A person. Frightened and hopeful and imperfect, and still, somehow, organizing himself around the love that the divorce was supposed to end. Still oriented toward Beth. Still oriented toward the children. Still, in the most fundamental sense of the word, a family man, even without the family immediately present. Seasons 4 and 5 are the Jerry plateau. Not regression, not dramatic advancement. The show having found a stable relationship with him and settling into it, using him well within the range it has established, giving him moments that honor the characterization without pushing it further than the season's larger concerns have space for. The old man in the seat gives him an unexpected window into Rick's interior life. Never Rick and Morty uses the meta-narrative structure to let him exist briefly outside the usual constraints. Star Mort Rickturn of the Jerry tests his physical courage and finds something real there. Each of these is an episode honoring what the show has built with Jerry without fundamentally extending it. And that is fine. Not every season needs to transform every character. Sometimes the right move is to tend to what you have built, to let it breathe, to let the audience spend time with a character they have come to know, inside stories that honor the knowing without requiring the character to do something new to justify the audience's continued attention. Seasons 4 and 5 tend to Jerry. They do it well. Season 6 Jerry is where the show's investment in him pays its clearest dividend. Bethic Twinstinct works as well as it does specifically because of what 6 seasons of Jerry characterization have deposited in the audience's relationship with him. The resolution scene, where Jerry chooses the marriage over the grievance, lands with the weight it lands with because the audience has spent 6 seasons watching Jerry try and try again and fail differently and keep trying. The scene is not a transformation, it is a culmination. Everything the show built with Jerry, every failure and every moment of unexpected strength, and every morning in the kitchen, and every school event, and every divorce paper, and every alien resort, and every Jerryboree lobby, all of it is present in that resolution scene. All of it is what makes him capable of the choice he makes. Not genius. Not the extraordinary capability that Rick would recognize as making the choice possible. Just the accumulated practice of choosing the people he loves over the easier option. He has been doing this for 6 seasons. Season 6 simply gives him a situation where the choosing is hard enough to be visible. Season 7 Jerry is the show's final, current statement about who Jerry is. And what it says is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is simply visible in the way he stands in the kitchen, in the specific quality of his presence in the family's spaces, in the small, unannounced ways he has changed from the man who stood in the same kitchen in Season 1, slightly to the side of the center, not quite certain of his place. Season 7 Jerry knows his place, not in the resigned, defeated sense of someone who has accepted a position below what they deserve, in the specific, hard-won sense of someone who has spent 7 seasons fighting for a place and who has arrived, through the fighting, at something that feels like his. The kitchen, the marriage, the family. The ordinary, specific, irreplaceable life he chose and kept choosing through everything that tried to make the choosing impossible. That is Season 7 Jerry, a man who stayed. Who knows, now, that he could survive if he had to leave. And who chooses, knowing this, to stay anyway. Not because he has nowhere else to go, because this is where he wants to be. That is the full arc, 7 seasons, from the man standing slightly to the side of the center, not quite certain, to the man standing in his kitchen, in his morning, in his life. Certain. In the only way Jerry has ever been certain about anything, which is not intellectually, not analytically, not through the application of Rick's kind of understanding to the available evidence, but through the simple, persistent, entirely human knowledge of someone who loves the people they live with and has decided every morning to keep living with them. Jerry's journey across 7 seasons is not the hero's journey. It is something more ordinary than that, and something, in its ordinariness, more true. The kitchen in the morning, the people coming downstairs, the gladness, every time, still there, still home. What Jerry means for the soul of Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty is a show that has always known what it wanted to say about genius. It wanted to say that genius is not enough, that intelligence, however extraordinary, however far beyond the reach of the being surrounding it, does not by itself produce a life worth living, does not guarantee wisdom, does not protect against grief, does not fill the specific human silence of a house where nobody is waiting for you to come home. It took the show longer to know what it wanted to say about ordinariness, about the specific, quiet, unglamorous form of human capability that does not announce itself and does not produce adventures and does not leave marks on the infinite branching structure of the multiverse. About staying, about showing up, about the kitchen in the morning and the family around the table, and the love that does not require the universe to be impressive in return for being real. Jerry taught the show what it wanted to say about that. Not intentionally. Jerry did not set out to be the show's argument for the ordinary. He set out, every morning, to make breakfast and be a husband and be a father and be present in the life he chose. The show watched him do it, and slowly, across 7 seasons, understood what it was watching. The show's central argument, the one it has been building towards since the pilot, and that 7 seasons of adventure and chaos and multiverse-scale consequence have been decorating rather than displacing, is this. The ordinary life is not less than the extraordinary one. It is differently expensive. Rick's extraordinary life costs him everything that the ordinary life provides. The constancy, the specific gravity of a place that expects you back, the person who is glad when you come home. He paid that cost, had it paid for him through the bomb that came through the portal, and has spent 30 years constructing an extraordinary existence around the wound the payment left. Jerry's ordinary life costs him everything the extraordinary life provides: the adventure, the significance, the sense of moving through the universe at a speed and scale that leaves marks, the feeling of mattering to something larger than the specific, contained world of one family in one house. Both costs are real. Both lives are real. The show has never pretended otherwise. But it has, across 7 seasons, gradually shifted the weight of its attention, from the extraordinary toward the ordinary, from Rick toward Jerry. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself or produces episodes built around the shift, but in the accumulation of small moments where the camera stays on Jerry a beat longer than the comedy requires, where his face carries weight that the surface content of the scene does not account for, where the show lets him be a person rather than a function. That shift is the show growing up, learning to see what it put in the kitchen. The garage and the kitchen are the show's 2 poles. Everything extraordinary happens in or out of the garage. Everything ordinary happens in or around the kitchen. And the show has always known, however much its surface narrative organized itself around the garage, that the kitchen was where the real story lived. The real story is not the multiverse. The real story is the family, is the specific, imperfect, constantly threatened and constantly renewed attempt to be in relationship with people who are difficult and who require things from you and who you will sometimes fail and who will sometimes fail you and who are, for all of that, the reason the adventures have any meaning. Without the kitchen, the garage is just a room where a lonely man builds things that impress him. Without Jerry in the kitchen, the family is just the collateral damage of Rick's adventures. Jerry makes the family a family, not through genius, through presence, through the daily, repeated, entirely unspectacular choice to be there, to be home. To be, in the specific and irreplaceable way that only ordinary love can be, the person who stays. The Jerrys in the Jerryboree lobby are not waiting because they have nowhere else to go. They are waiting because they chose something that requires waiting, because the life they've built is the kind of life that has people coming back to it. And you cannot have people coming back to you if you are not there when they arrive. So they wait, all of them, in every dimension, with the specific, patient quality of people who have decided that the waiting is part of the choice, who chose something that sometimes looks, from the outside, like limitation, and that feels, from the inside, like home. Across an infinite number of universes, the multiverse will keep producing extraordinary things. Geniuses who understand the universe at a level most beings never approach, Adventures that reshape the fabric of reality. Civilizations built by the most intelligent beings in existence and dismantled by the beings they produced. It will keep producing Rick. Brilliant and damaged and carrying the wound of the ordinary life he lost and the extraordinary life he built around the losing. It will keep producing Morty. Young and impressionable and slowly becoming, through the chaos of his adventures, more than what he started as. It will keep producing Beth. Brilliant and hungry and never quite satisfied and never quite giving up. And it will keep producing Jerry. Not because Jerry is exceptional, because Jerry is necessary. Because somewhere in the infinite branching structure of possible worlds, in every dimension where extraordinary people are doing extraordinary things, someone has to be in the kitchen. Someone has to be glad when people come home. Someone has to choose every morning the ordinary life. Not because the ordinary life is all that was available to them, but because the ordinary life, chosen freely, chosen over the alternatives, chosen with the full knowledge of what it costs and what it offers, is the life that makes everything else matter. The adventures matter because there is something to come home to. The genius matters because there is someone it is trying, however imperfectly and however unsuccessfully, to protect. The multiverse matters because somewhere inside it, in one specific house, in one specific dimension, a family is sitting down to dinner. Jerry made the dinner. Jerry is glad everyone is there. Jerry will be in the kitchen again tomorrow. In every universe, without exception, because some things the multiverse cannot afford to run out of. And ordinary love, chosen freely, shown up for daily, in the specific and unspectacular way that only ordinary people can show up for it, is one of them. The kitchen light is on. It is always on. Someone is home.